I thought I'll start off with a little story because storytelling is very much part of this mix. So my story begins in Fiji. Fiji is a dot on the world map. It is really tiny in global terms. I was born in a little village, a fishing village by the sea and tucked among the mountains. And I grew up fighting my own battles to get an education. And I think my story is important so that I can also push for the important value education plays in our lives. I used to sell vegetables by the roadside and at the local market on Saturdays from the time I was about 7 or 8 years old. I used to write letters of protest for my villages and farmers to the colonial sugarcane refining company for train for cane trucks to be delivered to my village so that they could send their harvested cane to the mills. I landed my first job as a journalist fresh out of high school. I did not know much about journalism then. The newspaper I used to work for, the Fiji Sun, was shut down at gunpoint during the first military coup in Fiji in 1987. A year later, I joined News Corporation owned Fiji Times, where I was chief of staff when I left Fiji in 1998 under a condition of crisis. Soon after covering the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Edinburgh in Scotland in 1997. I took up tertiary education at what was then University of Western Sydney, which led to the teaching of journalism in 2003. Again, I just want to mention that I landed my journalism job or journalism teaching job just out of the fact that I had asked my lecturer in the program some questions and he offered me a casual work. Anyway, this led to more work and I ended up becoming a full-time employee. And then I, of course, won a Australian government scholarship to finish my PhD studies, which I completed in 2012. For me, getting an education has been transformative. I saw firsthand the frustration of my village people, my very close family members, and of course my father who could not read and write. Today's masterclass is on the value of digital communication in a fast-moving world. And yes, indeed, we are in a very fast-moving world. I'm focusing on communication because communication cuts across all forms of professional work that we do, all forms of life we lead, all forms of relationships we have. It is the most important way of passing on a simple message. And how do we pass on these messages is very important. It has become even more important in this world of digital communication. And I will also focus on the value of storytelling because storytelling is very much related to communication. And without ethical and technical mastery, we are not able to deliver those stories or even communicate the simple message that we want to communicate. And of course, because we are living in a very fast-paced communications or environment, we need to work with speed. So I will talk about how we can work with speed, what are some of the techniques of doing that. Accuracy is very important because, of course, we live in a world of fake news as well. Adaptability, again, the fact that we may be doing something now, something else happens, how quickly are we able to switch on to something else and still not lose focus? That is very important, especially when you are working in the communications environment or in communications areas. Risk taking is very important too, and I am one for taking risks because without taking risks, we are not really learning much, we are not really pushing the boundaries, and without pushing the boundaries, we really don't know what's awaiting us on the other side of the barrier. Again, doing all of these things, we really need to also measure our outcomes. We can't be just working and can't be just writing for the sake of writing. It has to be targeted. It has to have a focus. And of course, we also have to have a focus in our life and in the communication we provide. And these are actually measured, especially the way we communicate today and the messages we put out in the social media platforms, say, for example. These are sort of measured in terms of the number of hits our messages get, number of views that we get, the search engine optimization of the messages, like what are the keywords that we use. We have to really choose our words carefully. I talked about personal communication earlier. How do we choose certain words so that we can really portray or send out the key messages? These are very important, and search engine optimization actually drives the sending and sharing of messages. So, what is communication? It involves sending and receiving information in the simplest of terms. There is the verbal communication, the words we use to communicate in any environment. What sort of words do we use in the home environment? What sort of words do we use when we talk to children, say, for example? What sort of words do I use when I send out a strong message to my students? What sort of words do I use in a professional communications environment, in a sales environment? Everything is about choice, and the choices we make lead to business, lead to failures, lead to relationships really forming, leads to relationships breaking up. Visual is seeing, and of course, seeing is believing. And that is why digital communication is so, so important. And of course, in this day and age, we are so lucky to be carrying the screen in our hands through the mobile devices that we carry. Professional writing and visual communication go hand in hand. Understanding how the new media works is so, so important because we are living in a media saturated environment. When I was working as a journalist back in Fiji, I only knew about the print environment or the print media, and of course, radio was there as well. My grandmother, who could not read or write, she would tune into the radio and have most important news that she tuned into was the death notices. And now, when I reflect back on her life, I have a little laugh to myself because I used to say to her, this used to be her way of going out of the village, out of home, because she loved going to funerals. So the funeral notices was something that she would listen to every day, and then she would go out and attend people's funerals. But for me, I started working in the print environment, so the written word became very much part of what I was engaging in. So again, for different people, communication and different mediums of communication have a whole value. Understanding how the new media works is very important, and it's important for everyone, irrespective of what career choices you make, what path you take in terms of the education you want to get, the kind of work environment you are planning to be in. It is because you really engage with communication every step of the way. Uh, and of course, when you are in that space, you also have to identify your market. So when you are putting out any message, when I am putting out messages targeting my students, how do I target those students? How do I make them engaged learners? Those are the questions that I ask myself. I used to teach using pen and paper initially when I started, but now everything is digital. When COVID-19 swept in, and in a big way, and we were supposed to start social distancing, and then of course we became all housebound, we all started working from home. We were very easily able to transform into a new learning space, which was online learning. So adaptability was the key word that I mentioned earlier. We were able to quickly adapt to a new learning space, and our students were very agile and adaptable as well, because that was our new reality. And I really think that this is going to be our new reality for a long time to come until we found a vaccination. I'd say that storytelling is an art or a specialization. The more stories you tell, the better you become at it. So when we talk about storytelling, I'm just sort of going to talk a bit about the times of cave paintings. That was the way of expressing oneself. That was the only way people knew how to say things because they weren't used to the writing of words as such. That was the way to send out a message. Now we have come a really, really long way from those humble beginnings. The old and oral traditions of passing knowledge and information through word of mouth has been transformed into the use of digital media to pass on messages. So in the past, the most effective way used to be the memory. So if one person tells a story or narrates something, And of course, we can talk about gossip as well. And the other person passed it on, and then the whole village knew about it, then the whole town, the whole country knew about it. It took a long time to get those messages out and send those messages across. Now, with the click of a button, we are able to send messages out. Look at the way we are communicating right now, sitting all around the world, basically, or in different parts of India. We are still connected. And this is the reality of our lives, or basically the future of our lives, the way that we are able to communicate or connect using digital media. Scholars today actually challenge some of the narrations of the past because they talk about, things have been lost in memory, so the original story has been changed or transformed or has not been related accurately or correctly. So that is again another new platform for learning and remembering, and of course sharing information and ideas. I'm just wondering if any of those who are participating in this master class remember any childhood stories. I'd like to pause for a bit so that you can jog your own memory and think about the times when you were being narrated stories that were being told by perhaps your parents or your grandparents. Does any story really jog your memory in terms of, yeah, it has stuck with you for all this time? Were you amazed by the story that was being told? I remember my grandmother used to tell me a story about, we used to all have long hair because we were so poor and there was no hairdresser as such, so all the girls in the village had long hair. And because I used to just leave my hair out and run around, my grandmother used to tell me, oh my God, if you leave your hair out, the devil will reside in that hair. And I used to really believe that until much later I realized that, oh, that was a real big fib. So those kinds of stories are etched in my memory. Thank you. Let's move on. And now I'm saying move over word of mouth, usher in the digital and visual media. Evidence of communication is now very important. So when we talk about, say, for example, oh, I've been given this job, the only official way to recognize this is through a offer letter, through an email that confirms that, yeah, the job is yours. Uh, we have any kind of communication, we have to write an email and say, this is what's happening. We report at work and, of course, respond via email. So all those mediums of communication require us to be very professional in our approach and, of course, prepare us for the future of the kind of environment we'll be living in. Visual is basically seeing and believing. The power of the screen is very important. Pictures say 1,000 words has been a popular saying, but I say that moving images say 1,000,000 words before we can even bat an eyelid. Many of us think that we know a lot of things just by seeing things in the visual media environment or in the digital media spaces. Visual cuts across all forms of barriers. And I'm again, because I think most of my audience is from India, and of course, Bollywood movies are a classic and a great example to say that, they are very visual, very entertaining, but many of those movies have such a strong message that they send out, and they are becoming sort of a global stamp for India in terms of sharing its culture, its tradition, its rich history, all those things combine into what is what we see on screen, say, for example. We feel really connected and part of that story or part of that society because it also provides us with entertainment value. Photos again transport us to places where we can't be, and that is another really, really interesting trend to watch. And again, I want to talk about digital journey, the thrill of experiencing the world in digital journeys. Say, for example, reading things in the palm of our hands and being entertained. Like you just have to look around to see how people are communicating in this world and in this day and age. They may be sitting right next to a person, but they're better off sending a text message. They may be sitting right next to someone on the train, but they are not able to start a conversation or communicate because they are so hooked onto whatever they are able to see on their mobile devices. this has become our reality, and this has become a very strong point of communication as well. It doesn't mean that because we are not talking to the person next to us, we are not communicating. We are in our completely different zone, sort of zoned out in terms of who we are communicating with and how we are communicating. I was just talking to a colleague this morning, and she's the university photographer, and she said to me, "Oh my God, I've got all these images that I have captured, but I have to provide voiceover and make these moving images rather than just having them as photos because the visual is so important, Asha." And I said, "Oh my God, I'm just having this really interesting conversation with you today because I'm preparing a presentation for today's master class," and she was really impressed that I'm doing this. But this has become another reality, so another perspective from someone who's working on the ground, working with photos, just taking still photos, but now she has to make them moving images and narrate voiceover to those images so that people understand what the images are about. This is how far we've come. Examples again include virtual tours. Given the COVID 19 situation, so many exhibitions, for example, in Sydney have been cancelled. One of my students in class pitched today about how the Sydney Biennale is now going to become a virtual or a moving exhibition so people can enjoy it sitting in the comfort of their homes. And who is putting all this together? It's being driven by technology, but of course, who is driving this technology? It's human beings, it's people who have been trained as experts in the field of communication, who have mastered the technical mastery of presenting these sets of information in a real way. It provides people with an immersive experience. The emotional connection to things is so, so important when we think about strategizing for communication, when we build our communication strategies, say, for example, places, people we don't really know, but we feel that we are connected to. And I'm again using the example of Facebook. The reason for this is I suspect that the majority of the audience that I'm talking to today are young people who are at the cusp of change in their lives, working towards going into the education field, going to university, going to university for tertiary or further education, or upskilling themselves to go into the work environment. But they are really users of Facebook, say, for example. How many Facebook friends do you have? I always say this to my students. They say, "Oh, I've got lots of friends." Who are your friends? Oh, they are on Facebook. Do you remember names? Not really. So again, like I said, the world has become very abstract to us. And I'm not criticizing it. I'm just making a statement that this has become our reality, and we are moving in a very fast-paced space. I would say to all of you, please slow down a bit. And again, COVID 19, as much as it has brought us so much grief, I think it has also put us in a place where we are going to see things in retrospection and basically perhaps even get one with nature, get one with the kind of space and the environment that we are living in. And think about deeply thinking through things is very important, and again, very important in the world of communication. Instagram, for example, again, is another medium. We are constantly uploading photos, telling the world where we are, what we are doing. There doesn't seem to be much limit or boundary in terms of our own privacy in such spaces. Again, I'm not being critical. I also use some of these social media platforms, but of course, everyone has their own sort of boundary. They make their own decisions. I will only say to especially young people who don't have the kind of life experiences perhaps that I have, please be very careful as to what you put on such social media sites, because just a alert to you is that most employers these days look at your social media postings before you go into a job interview. Be very careful in terms of being able to separate between your social life and, of course, your work life or your student life. Again, TikTok is another medium that's very popular in Australia and all over the world. There are so many other such forums where we post things, where we engage with materials that others post, where we actually expose ourselves as well. It is really a saturated market of the abstract world. Sifting through the clamor of information is really, really vital as well. We have to know which information is important to us so that we can make some right decisions. Say, for example, in a political environment, when we go to vote, how many of us really know about the political parties that we are voting in or the people we are voting to be our representatives in a democratic environment? Ask yourself this question and do a bit of soul searching. Who will do this sort of information gathering for us and alert us and provide us with the really important information so that we can make right decisions? This takes us back to what I had initially said about how important communication is, how important it is to separate fake from the real. Storytellers of a special kind actually do this for us. And now I will introduce you to what I have been doing for a living for a long, long time, which is storytelling as a journalist. I could not separate professional storytelling or journalism from this presentation because I think journalism is in my DNA. And actually, I'll be really honest with you, I think I work 24/7 because I can't stop thinking about story ideas. I can't stop noticing things and noticing stories in things. And I'll also teach you some basics in this master class about your ability to notice things in a minute. But let's start off with the 5 Ws and the H of news and of information as well. When I talk about the 5 Ws, these are the who, what, when, where, why, and I'm pretty sure this may be general knowledge to you, but I really wanted to revisit this because this is where journalism is actually situated. The fact that with any piece of journalism that one produces, be it for digital media, for print media, for online, for blogs, you present it as a tweet, you do answer these basic questions because this is what the publics want to know. And of course, that is again very closely embedded with storytelling. Your creative talent comes in, the content you produce is very important, the kind of history or background knowledge or information that you bring to the story is very important. What kind of experience are you giving your reader or your viewer? Experience is very important again in terms of the entertainment value of news kicks in. Of course, and how do you market that story? When I started working as a journalist, I used to just go to work, arrive at work, sit down in front of a typewriter, type the story, then put it on a teleprinter. It would come out across to the other side, and then the typesetters would put it all together, go into a page bromide, and then the paper would go out. Now, journalists tweet about what they're working on. They put a blog out about their stories before they even start writing the real story. Because then that's the way of getting people to comment. That's the way of getting sources to comment. That's the way of reaching out to the masses to get a variety of viewpoints so that you are able to write all of that in your story. And I will now actually talk about the 24-hour news cycle, but we start with a single idea in journalism practice. We use our senses to what you say, what we call, someone has a nose for news, or someone has got a really good news sense. In other words, you can smell a story brewing from a distance. And I mean that in the abstract sense because you have trained your mind so well that whatever you read, you are critically analyzing it. Whatever you see, you are critically seeing it. Whatever you hear, you are critically hearing it. And in other words, the processes start to happen and you are able to then find a new angle or a new element or something really extraordinary in seemingly ordinary things. Talking about the COVID-19 situation, I just want to say that it is again a delicate balance. I'm jumping from the trail that I had set up earlier, but I will explain this to you later. But let's talk about the COVID-19 situation and how we can notice stories because I really still want to keep that rhythm. Stories involve research. They also involve investigation, interviews. Primary sources are people and the sources that you go to for information. Say, for example, if you're looking at statistical data, in Australia, the Australian Bureau of Statistics will have primary information because they have gone out and done the data collection, providing that information. Another primary source would be perhaps the Prime Minister if you are asking him questions about the COVID-19 situation. Secondary sources would be the history of disease in the world. If you're writing a story about COVID-19, say for example, the history of viruses, for example, similar to what was presented in the masterclass yesterday. Dealing within the realm of facts is very important. The fact that journalists go out and look for factual information. They try not to write opinion. Of course, these days there is a lot of opinion being written by real journalists as well. So finding factual information and then, of course, finding that right balance in the story. So getting the other side of the story. So if the Prime Minister is talking about strategy on the ground in relation to COVID-19, do you also speak to the leader of opposition to get the opposition's viewpoint on what the government is doing? All the packages that the government is sending out or giving out to Australians who are doing it tough in this day of the COVID-19. Are they also consulting with the opposition in relation to passing legislation that allows those kinds of packages to be given to ordinary Australians? The journalists have to go out and get that level of information to demonstrate that they are being objective and, of course, to present a fair and accurate story. And then, of course, demonstrate objectivity. I'm saying demonstrate objectivity because we are all human beings. We can only demonstrate that we are being objective because, of course, we bring in our own subjectivities to issues. We are human beings, so we feel strongly about certain things and less strongly about certain other things. And of course, because we are writing those stories, we need to demonstrate that, yes, I'm objective. I'm removing my own self from the story and allowing people who have got the authority to comment on this issue, comment on the issue. So again, given this global pandemic, the world is watching. What kinds of stories are in circulation? Are we all the participants in this forum, are we all actually reading these stories? Are we understanding how the COVID-19 situation is affecting us now as we are staying housebound? In 2 weeks' time, as the rules are relaxed a bit and we are out and about, how are the media presenting the information to us? What are the things we still need to watch out for? These become realities for us, so please become very aware. If you haven't been aware and you have been too caught up in your own little world with social media and all that, it is all good, but go and get the real stories to the real journalists as well. And I'd really encourage you to do that. And what are you doing during the lockdown? This is my big question. So I've been talking for such a long time. Now I've come to this point where I want to know, what are my listeners doing? What are you doing to use up the time, the free time, the supposedly free time that you have? Are you keeping a video diary? Those young minds who are out there and who I have so much hope on to be our future journalists and our future drivers of change. Are you actually recording all the things that are happening to you emotionally, to people who are close to you, to the grandmother who may be living with you? Are all these people part of your network? Are you really capturing those stories? What about happening in your community, in your family, in your home environment? Think about the possible stories that you can write and then put those on the digital media platforms. There are so many possibilities waiting to be explored. I want to talk about Blundell's 5 ways of doing stories or thinking about stories. He talks about extrapolation, taking a small idea, like I said earlier, and then, of course, magnifying it. And for you, the small idea can be COVID-19. So many of my students, my current students in the journalism program, are working on COVID-19 stories related to COVID-19. And one of the basic things that I asked them to do in my first year unit, in the Introduction to Journalism unit, was Start noticing things. And I said to them, because they're very young, feisty, and want to live life on the edge, I said, okay, push yourselves and start listening to people's conversations. And that time, COVID-19 had not set in. So I had said to them, when you are in public spaces, say, for example, on trains, try and listen to what the person sitting next to you is saying. Even if they're having a phone conversation, eavesdrop. But of course, don't record it because it's illegal to do so, and then come and report back to class. And so when they come back and report to class, we laugh so much in class because so many people wash their dirty linen in public. They talk about relationship breakdowns, they talk about so many things. And then we end up having discussions. They pitch story ideas, and then of course I give them feedback. My other students jump in or jump on board and comment and add commentary to the ideas. And many students end up writing a real new story based on the fact that they had listened to a conversation. And listening to conversations or using your senses in this day and age is something really unique and special. I say to my students, those of you who are not traveling or who are not out and about and want to challenge yourself, start following things on social media. What are the things people are talking about? That can be a trigger for a story idea as well. Synthesis is an attempt to unify unrelated elements into an informative whole. Again, so many different elements can come together and make a really interesting COVID-19 story. Localization is another very important element. Thinking small. Again, I'm using the COVID-19 example because that's more relatable to all of us who are participating in this forum. Start with your own home environment, your little village, or in your own personal space. You can even talk about your own feelings of loneliness, of liberation, because you are now, for the first time ever, getting some time to think and not be forced to rush in the morning peak traffic, say, for example. These are really important areas to visit and think about, and the stories are waiting to be told. You are the ones who can tell these stories. Projection, look beyond the current event. How, and this is what journalists do too, the fact that they are able to predict and project using statistics, using current situations, using a whole lot of things and their own experiences having worked as journalists. They look beyond the current events. So many stories right now that are circulating around the globe are what's going to happen post COVID-19, post the time when we are coming out of lockdown. How are we going to make readjustments? What is going to be our new normal? These are the kinds of questions that are being asked. So journalists are also expected to predict consequences, even in political situations. Take your memory back to the times when you have elections in your own country. How do the journalists predict? And of course, in Australia, I do not say too much, but most of the Australian journalists got it wrong the last time around we had elections. Again, point of view is very important. What sort of ideas do we have? When I started working as a journalist, I wasn't supposed to have an opinion. I had to get other people's opinion and write journalism, and I'm talking about 37 years ago. Now, journalists are expected to have a viewpoint, and not only journalists, anyone going in for a job interview is normally asked, "What are your thoughts on this particular situation, or this particular political situation, or this particular social situation? What sort of solution would you find to this problem, or would you bring to the table? How much do you know about our organization? If you were an employee here, what would you change? What kind of stories will you bring on the table?" These are the kinds of questions that get asked. In other words, we all are expected to have a point of view or a viewpoint on a situation. Again, going back to what the topic of this presentation is, digital communication. You have to capture the action and the drama. Remember, I mentioned briefly the entertainment value of journalism and entertainment value of news, the entertainment value of any form of communication. You have to become active, capture the lived experiences. Your camera's lens becomes your theater. Think about just being in isolation at home. What are you doing? Are you playing around with whatever device you have, whether it's a camera, a full flash camera, or your mobile phone, excuse me? Um, Are you keeping a diary? How many of you are in the habit of keeping a diary or remembering things or noting things down or keeping a notebook? One of the key things that I teach my journalism students in the first year is please keep a diary or a notebook or even register things in your mobile device, in your phone. Keep a diary of what are the thoughts that come to your mind? What are the things that you think about when you see something on the street? They become news ideas. And then sometimes when they go into the real world of working in journalism or practicing in the communications field, they refer back to the diary and say, oh my God, 10 years ago, this is what happened. And now I've got it. I've got it all in detail. And I could refer back to it because it's history repeating itself. So it's very important to understand and get into the good habit of recording things. And of course, a lot of people blog. I managed to speak with a former student of mine who is now working in London, and she did a special guest lecture for my students just 2 weeks ago because I couldn't have a big guest lecture event that I had planned for a on-campus event because we were in lockdown. So I tapped on the shoulder of the student through LinkedIn and I said, "Will you be able to prepare a little lecture pod for me?" In that lecture pod, she talks about how she started blogging when she was 17 years old. Now she's working for BBC in London and another news producer. And she's come a really long way, but she said the fact that she was blogging gave her that opportunity as a stepping stone into the real world. And she's still doing that. Keeping a memoir, for example, is very important again. Documentary of, the films you make, the little short documentaries that you make are very important. Writing fiction is again very important. Start looking outside your home. What do you see? I'm trying to inspire you to become really engaged with the spaces that you live and work in so that you are able to notice things and of course, see or find interesting things in seemingly ordinary situations. Your thoughts, your feelings, these are really important as well. As a young person, as someone who is 18, 20 years old, how are you coping with this COVID-19 situation? Your story is unique to you. And your story is important because once you put out your story and your feelings um, in the digital media spaces, someone else will come along and comment on it. Someone else will share it and add to it, add more value to it. And then all of a sudden you realize that you're not alone in this world. There are so many other thousands and millions of people who are going through similar challenges. And then, of course, you may form a bond. You may start something new so that you can help each other handle the situation. Cooking at home, oh God, let's talk about that. Like, especially when we live in countries like Australia where fast food is a way of life. How are we reverting to cooking at home during the COVID-19 situation? How are families coping? How are individuals coping? I mean, I'm not sitting on a high pedestal and judging anyone, but I'm just sharing my own experiences. My children, some of them are not really sort of used to eating just the home cooked meals, but now they are all into it because of the fear factor as well. So how healthy is it? I have my own backyard garden. I come from a farming background. I've got very little space in my backyard in Sydney, but I have got right now, as I'm speaking, about 5 pumpkins in my garden, and of course all the green leafy vegetables, all my spices. I mean the herbs and all, they're all in my garden, so I can survive basically. And I also wanted to talk about the Western Sydney University's soup kitchen because one of my students reminded me of that today. And I'll just give you a quick example of how cooking has been transformed as a result of COVID-19. The university used to have a soup kitchen to help students during the COVID-19 situation. But because of the lockdown, not many people are able to go to the places where the food was being actually cooked and served. So what happened? The food, the ingredients for the soup or the food gets delivered to the students. And then, of course, there is a special online class. So once everyone has received their package, the food pack, meaning the ingredients, then they are able to tune into the online classes or the master classes, if I can call that. And they tune in and they are actually given instructions as to how to cook. And so it's a really small, short network, but they are having fun. So they've come up with really new creative ideas. Again, lifestyle is very important. I don't know if many of you are familiar with Humans of New York. You can even do a quick Google search to find this. It's a really interesting site to go to. There are so many lessons to learn from the stories that have been posted onto this site. And again, you can start talking about the humans of Delhi, the humans of Sydney, the humans of all these other places around the world based on the stories that are in the Humans of New York site. Again, while I'm talking about all these fast moving spaces and environments and the things that you can do, what do you do when you are in your own silent or tranquil space? What thoughts come to mind? How is silence impacting you? How is silence helping you? How are you able to silence those cravings, the things that you are used to? Say, for example, going to the bars and the pubs and all that. Now that you can't do that, how do you silence those ideas and those thoughts? Again, rich idea for stories. Sorry, I'm just thinking stories because this is my brief for today. Survival. What about family stories? Not everyone is doing it really well. Everyone, I can guarantee you, there are so many thousands and millions of families who are living in isolation and in quiet isolation that we are not even getting to hear their stories. We talk about the voiceless in a big environment, and there are definitely so many people who are really doing it tough. How are we going to tell those stories? Are we one of those families ourselves? Are we willing to talk about those experiences? These are my questions to you. Your shrinking space is in this global world. Again, when you talk about anything we do in life, whether we are writing a story, we are doing a digital narrative, we are doing making a short film or a documentary, it's all about decision making and putting your own reputation or your rapport on the line. Decisions such as what angle are you taking on a particular story? Who are the sources that you are going to talk to? What kind of words you choose? Going taking us back to the first few slides where I talked about or spoke about the importance of words and the choices we make and the narratives we provide. These are all decisions. And such decisions then become the yardstick to measure your professional standards. The kind of trust you build in among the people you target with your work, among the people you communicate with, among the people you network with, you really have to be very careful in terms of the decisions you make regarding a particular story, who to connect with. I initially talked about authoritative sources in the real world of journalism, but even when you are putting together your own narrative, how do you present that? Are you honest right at the beginning to say that this is my story and I'm telling this story and for whatever reason? Build your reputation or rapport, it's very important. And I just wanted to also talk quickly about what what is public interest. The fact that the public has a right to know, and that is basically one of the key elements or key areas of journalism practice, and that is the foundation of journalism practice actually in relation to the fact that we do things in the interest of public good and because the public has a right to know. And then, of course, we question power, question authority, and everyone should be questioning power and authority, not the journalists, but the journalists do this for us. Remember earlier I talked about who is going to find out all this information and filter it and present it to us. We live in an environment saturated with information and ideas, but of course, it's the journalists who go out and find this information and they make decisions. Like I said earlier, they make decisions about what will be or may be important for this group of people. What should they know? Again, going back to COVID-19, what were some of the key messages that were coming out through journalism and through the media to us in terms of how do we fight this COVID-19 virus? One of the things was make sure you wash your hands. The 20-second wash was the key message that many media actually initially failed to focus on. So it's very, very important, and journalists really play a very important role in society. And for those who are doomsayers or who think that journalism is coming to an end, I can say to you, journalism is going to recreate itself and come back with a very strong force and a powerful force, because people will get fed up of listening to fake news and people are intelligent journalists. Generally speaking, I, I trust in people the fact that they are always looking out for themselves, so they will know that yeah, this is fake news, and everyone should be able to differentiate between fake and what is real, and of course. No information for yourself, but of course you rely on journalism because there's so much information. Say, for example, when Parliament is sitting right now, Parliament is sitting in Australia. How will we know what is actually going on there? We can't be there ourselves. We can't read through the masses and masses of documents that are being presented in Parliament. We can't even physically be there while the Parliament is sitting, even if we tune into the recorded versions of it by the media later on. We can't. It's just not possible to get all that information. The journalists go out, find that information, filter it, and then present it to us. But also remember that journalism serves another purpose, which is what the public is interested in. It's very different from public interest. What the public is interested in, of course, generally speaking, look at the media around you. Again, digital and visual media as well. Gossip, entertainment, all these things are very much part of how humans live their lives. We want to be entertained. Even in hardcore news, there is always entertainment value in it, taking you back to the choice of words we use, what photos we use, how we present or package information or news or communication. Always ask yourself, does this story interest me? If it's not interesting to you, it will not make any sense or will not interest any reader. So all those of you who will be trying out new things after this forum, please keep that in mind. We live in a 24-hour, 7-day news environment. We are constantly connected. We may be living in different parts of the world, but what is going on in one corner of the world comes to us in the palm of our hand as we switch on. Like sometimes, as soon as I wake up, I really check news, and especially during the heightened time of the COVID-19 situation. And of course, because we live in this sort of space, short breaking news is very, very important. Everyone wants to be the first to break news. This is what happened. This is what the Prime Minister said. And then you later revisit it and write a long form story for online. But of course, a lot of journalists tweet about what the Prime Minister says, say, for example, or what is happening in New York, or what is Donald Trump saying. I'm again talking politics, but this is the reality of the kind of environment we exist and live in. Tweets, blogs, online, other social media and platforms are very much part of who we have become as consumers of news, as consumers of information, as producers of information, as people who share such information on our social media sites, and of course, the creators of such information as well. Videographs are really important, and this is something that I also teach my students or encourage them to engage with right from when they come into our programs. And I've said this to you as well. If you can handle that, please start fiddling around and start producing digital work, because that is the way of the future. Even if you don't go into the fields of communication as such, any work that you do requires those skills. Yeah. Again, back to the search engine optimization, the hashtags really work. Impact of stories are valued or measured in such a way. Relevance is very important, or a keyword here. It has to be informative. Sharing is very important. There's so much sharing taking place. Sometimes people just share without even thinking. And I really don't want to be critical here, but again, through all this sharing, we are really opening up opportunities for other people to learn and understand. There's always the positive and the negative, the good and the bad, but it's all packaged into one. Social media, again, plays a very key role in all of this, and please be aware of that too. Your passport to the world of work is your own creativity, how curious you are, how do you develop your original ideas, and how do you actually own it? And this crosses all sorts of borders, spectrums, everything. Your own creativity. And the reason why I agreed to do this masterclass is so that I can talk to you in a very general term and sort of encourage you or inspire you to start becoming producers of the new media that we are engaging with right now. Create the visual and give it that presence and take it to the world stage and create your own buzz. Start getting noticed. And this is how, like, sometimes people put in something really small, something very trivial, and then all of a sudden it becomes news and it's trending as, oh my God, did you see this video clip? It's really interesting. It has got a very strong message. That's the kind of conversations we hear people have. And it is because of the impact of such media. Again, you ask questions, ethical research, you exhaust your sources, you present work in multimedia formats with accuracy and speed. And of course, you keep moving on. And once you do that, you keep doing it, and it becomes habit. And sometimes you subconsciously become such good masters of this art that you unknowingly become an expert. And then when you go for a job interview and you showcase your work, people just say, oh, wow, this is your work. And then you realize, oh my God, I started when I was 17, when I was 18, and look at how much information and knowledge I have accumulated. Again, I say digital skills are a launchpad for your study and work. Every field of work values communication skills, creativity, problem solving. In doing little things, you are demonstrating that you are solving the world's problems. And that's what we need. That's the kind of attitude we need in our workers of the future. Emotional intelligence is again very important. The fact that you are really switched on and you are able to understand what's happening on the ground and you are able to adapt and work in a fast changing environment or a space. The soft skills are very important. Soft skills become your communication skills, your human to human communication, your capacity building, the measured outcomes you bring out or you produce. They become very important. And they become very important elements in leadership environment as well. Your personality is very important. Storytelling in a work context, any job application. So taking you back to another level. I've talked about journalism and storytelling in social media and digital and all of that. Now I'm going to talk about storytelling in the context of writing a job application, say for example. Again, your links to your digital profile and portfolio is very important because any job application that you send through in this day and age has to have that link. What is your, uh, LinkedIn profile? You have to really provide all those links when you are writing a job application. Job applications these days actually require you to fill in forms. That's another really interesting element to this. Again, your resume, your CV. How do you prepare that? What are the things that you are including in that? So if you are trying to build a profile for yourself now during this COVID-19 situation, start early. All the work that you are producing as stories, all that become part of your resume. And I can guarantee you, employers in this day and age not only look at your academic transcripts, they look at what kinds of work you've done, what kind of community service you have done, what kind of charity work you've done, what kind of volunteer work you've done, what kind of social media do you have. Are you really agile? Are you really adaptable? Those are the skills that are really valued. Again, at job interviews, you can present your portfolio. Sometimes you don't even have to do that. Your prospective employer has done all the searching and the researching about you. What has changed? Again, sometimes you don't even go for a physical job interview or present yourself as such. You do what you call a virtual conference, or you are required to log into a particular site and then do a video interview, meaning the questions will pop up and then you answer those questions. And that gets recorded and that's your interview done and dusted. Answer recorded questions to computer or camera or video has become our reality or new reality now. And with COVID-19 and with social distancing and all of that, I can see that as becoming our new reality. This is how we prepare for the future of work. Reputation and image are very important. Remember this. I'm going revisiting some of the key points. Communicate ethos and your own values, especially in the corporate and the government and business world. Who does all of this? Again, you have the skills, you've mastered the skills, you have accumulated all the knowledge. Now when it comes to practicing, look out for the kinds of advertisements that are out there when people are seeking workers or employees. What skills do they require? Communication skills, ability to communicate, work with speed, personable. These are really important attributes to have. Again, seek value in message and the niche and global markets. Campaigns, advertising, personal branding, corporate branding, all these actually require storytelling skills, your ability to communicate effectively and in digital spaces as well. Writing, editing, these are perennial. Broadcasting, again, is very important. Accuracy, speed, I'm revisiting these. Screen and multimedia skills, and of course, you understand your niche markets. Who are you writing for? Who are you presenting this for? Are very, very important and key. Political messaging during the COVID-19 situation. Refer back or reflect back on to you what was happening in your own country. Who were the key people presenting the key messages to you? The faces of the messages, who were they? What sort of visuals were being presented? The words and the pictures, what kind of impact or message did they carry? How were these presented? Were they televised messages from the Prime Minister? And if they were so, what was the Prime Minister saying? What was the key message? Was he saying one long paragraph, or did he just have two or three key messages, key words that he was using? So again, back to the basics of communication. What were the videographs about? What were the other people in the other spaces in your country looking at? Were there posters, radio messages, podcasts, use of public figures, celebrities? Were Bollywood personalities being used to pass down the key messages because people relate to them much more easily? Was that happening in India? Ask yourself that question, find the answers. I'm just quickly showing you some spaces on screen. This is important only because I just want to show you that when we teach in the journalism area, this is our TV studio on campus in Parramatta South. Our students get hands-on experience in terms of what they learn, and then by the time they walk the red carpet to get their degree, they have the degree, but they also have a really well polished portfolio of work, and of course their digital stamp in the media spaces in terms of the way they have set up their LinkedIn site, the way they have networked with others in the media industries and environment. This is the editing suite. Again, students work in groups to produce digital stories. And just coming to the close of wrapping up, choose your fields of study wisely. This is my advice to you. Your digital footprint creates your profile, your social media, and your brand. Remember that, please. So think carefully about what you put even on your social media site. And if you haven't started working in these spaces, perhaps when you have that clear headspace, now is the time to do that. It doesn't matter what field of study you go into, what you do in life, generally speaking, you still will have to communicate. It's better to start learning now. And one of the other key ways of learning this or mastering this art is read. The more you read, the better you'll become. The more you write, the better you'll become. Reading and writing are so closely intertwined that you can't separate that, and they actually empower you. Remember, knowledge is power and information is power as well. The digital value in short is that it has to be succinct, it has to have the visual information, especially for people who are time poor and are in the fast lane. Remember these are sort of key information or key messages that I have talked about today. Employment prospects, the future of work. Again, digital literacy is a key. Communication skills are very important. How quickly you can deliver outcomes, how adaptable you are. This is a very important attribute to have. And given the COVID-19 situation, how have we adapted? Ask yourself this question. And what would you have done differently? It's always good to reflect on the things you've done and how you can improve. There's always room for improvement in whatever we do in life. So think about that aspect of how you've managed in this situation. Creative thinkers and problem solvers are very much in demand. Your soft skills, your personable skills are in demand as well. How do you treat other people? How well do you work in a group environment? What sort of collaborative work are you able to produce? These are very important. Emotional intelligence, which I just touched on earlier, is equally important. Again, I said earlier, our teaching is also online and on campus, so we use multiple modes of teaching to engage our students. And those of you who are probably seeking some way of learning and are feeling a bit stuck at home, now is the time to consider all of that. In fact, one of my very important key colleagues is also in this forum, Namrata. She will be able to also assist you. And of course, you can touch base with Neha. I'm happy to share my contact with anyone. And look, my reason for presenting this is just to reach out to you and help you. And if anyone needs any kind of help and guidance with whatever they're choosing to do, you don't necessarily have to do journalism. This is my act of generosity during COVID-19, and of course, education in Australia is really valued. It's top notch, and it's world class. So come to us. But also, if you need any kind of assistance, reach out. The other thing that you really need to think about when you are writing or presenting your stories or doing your digital stories, solutions learning. Solutions learning has become a key mantra in the learning environment and a key mantra in what I teach as well. I think I've had so many years of experience. Now I'm at that other end of my career where I'm thinking I have to leave a legacy behind. What kind of solutions am I finding for the world's problems? And so again, solutions via education, the fact that you can empower communities, empower individuals is very important. You engage with them, you enable people. Enabling through technology, enabling through storytelling is very important. Again, back to the 5 Ws and the H. And then when I started working in journalism, who done it was very important. We used to think, who is responsible for this? Why is the government doing this? All the Ws were very key. Now the focus is on how. We find solutions to the world's problems. We provide solutions rather than focus on problems. And engaging, the learning becomes much more engaging. The results become much more empowering. And of course, we enable and we collaborate. And we can't do everything alone or by ourselves. You know, by joining forces, we can really create a different world for tomorrow. Again, sort of reiterating what I've talked about, sky is the limit. Creative thinkers are very much in demand. You have to innovate. You have to be tech savvy. You have to access research. You have to do research. You have to find out what's available or what's the background to something that you're working on. It's an ongoing work environment, so it does not end here or end with the degree that we get. It's lifelong learning. Communication, the ability to produce work digitally is a lifelong learning environment. We don't know what's going to be in fashion in 5 years' time or the way to do things in 5 years' time, in 2 years' time. We really don't know. But we have to maximize on the opportunities that present to us right now and here. Again, global media and businesses are really our focus again, governments, federal, state, and local NGOs, all the networks that we can get in connected with. And of course, the media landscape has changed. The world order for the voiceless to be heard. And that becomes our responsibility as a collective for the learning spaces, that we really look out for the people who don't have a voice. We have to, I'll just quickly talk about, Neha mentioned this earlier when she introduced me about the projects that I've introduced or been successful with, the 3 projects that she mentioned. Again, reporting lived experience is termed new journalism. My students have had the opportunity to do this. And my students really adapted very well to those situations. And I want to quickly show you some of the examples of the work they produced in a global space. They were very adaptable. Cyclone Winston, we went and covered this tragedy soon after the cyclone hit Fiji in 2017. Students wrote so many stories, and again, we worked very collaboratively with the Australian High Commission based in Sydney, in Fiji. And then I took students to West Bengal in 2018. Again, look at the students and how they went to the village and wrote so many stories as a result of that experience. And in the social media, all the students who went with me, upon graduation, had already secured work. And I'm saying this looking at the screen, hoping that you are looking me in the eyes with the guarantee that, yeah, that kind of exposure allowed or facilitated the students to expose their work to the world and then, of course, become very marketable. I'm sharing these stories as examples to show you that these things are really possible. And again, when I took the students to Nepal soon after the earthquake in 2015, so we arrived there in 2016, and this is on the day we arrived in Nepal, we heard the news about this academic from Victoria who passed away while summiting Mount Everest. We were the ones to really break the factual information in the story, and the student wrote the front page of the Australian newspaper. And I thought I'll show you this. So the world is your oyster. This is what I'm trying to say to you. Please go out and search and find answers, find solutions, be yourself, do the best you can, and live well. Thank you so much.